Welcome to The Way I Understand It.
The way I understand
Sit back, relax, and enjoy your journey into the abyss.
Sit back,
Hope you find your way too. Buckle up.
relax, and enjoy your journey into the abyss. Hope you find your way too.
Hello and welcome everyone. You're listening to The Way I Understand It podcast hosted by Gaurav Patnaik, chemical engineer and MBA by education, seeker and solver by choice, author and educator by accident. Just listen in, ponder, question and see the world differently.
Have you ever opened your electricity bill and seen the rates just surge completely out of the blue? It leaves you scratching your head wondering why, right? Or maybe you've been looking at buying a new scooter or a car only to find the fuel options are shifting in a way that makes your current vehicle feel, well, a little obsolete. You start to question its future, how long it will really be useful. It's this subtle feeling, a sense that the very ground beneath your economic feet is shifting and you're not quite sure why or how. It's that sense of unseen forces at play, of complex connections you can't quite put your finger on. Welcome to The Way I Understand It. Today, we're going to try and connect some of those dots. We're plunging into a topic that touches every single one of us in India, our nation's energy future. And let me tell you, it's not simple. My research into this, digging into financial statements, has revealed a complex interplay of policies, corporate strategies, and technological rollouts that have hidden complexities beneath what look like, straightforward shifts. This isn't just about flicking a light switch or filling up your tank. It's about strategic national choices, deep economic vulnerabilities, and what it might actually mean for your everyday life, your budget, and even your long-term security. Just a quick but important disclaimer before we get started. The information I'm sharing today is based on my own research and analysis of publicly available reports and data. It's meant to be educational and to help you ask better questions. It is not financial or technical advice that you should act on directly. Please always consult with your financial advisor or qualified technical experts for guidance specific to your situation. My mission today is to unpack a series of incredibly insightful findings that seem to lay bare some powerful patterns emerging in India. And to be clear, I am not here to spin some grand conspiracy theory. That's not the goal, but I am examining if we are witnessing a significant convergence of risk factors. That's a theme I'll keep coming back to. We'll explore critical questions around energy distribution, the vehicle choices you might face, and even national security implications, all designed to give you a shortcut to being truly well informed. What's really fascinating here, I think, is how these seemingly separate things, corporate governance issues, rolling out smart meters, changes in fuel policy, the big push for electric vehicles, they start to weave together into a cohesive and maybe slightly concerning picture. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really presents a fundamental lesson. Maybe one that ancient strategists like Chanakya would recognize about national risk management. It's that classic advice, don't put all your eggs in one basket. My investigation suggests this kind of concentration, this putting all your strategic eggs in one basket, can create unforeseen havoc, especially when a crisis hits, like relying on one source for critical tech and then finding yourself cut off. This underscores the critical importance of diversified strategies for a nation's energy destiny and its broader economic resilience. It's fundamental. Let's start with a really fascinating parallel that my research turned up. It's a striking comparison between certain financial practices seen with Adani Enterprises and, those that led to the spectacular downfall of the American energy giant Enron. Yes, it's a bold claim, isn't it? A comparison that immediately grabs your attention. For those who might not recall the whole Enron saga, which really blew up around 2001, it's still a classic cautionary tale in corporate malfeasance. Business schools still study it intensely. It wasn't just one thing that brought them down. It was this toxic cocktail of aggressive, incredibly complex trading strategies and blatant market design abuse. I mean, they were notorious for gaming the California electricity market, causing rolling blackouts that affected millions. All of that was masked by the pervasive, deceptive use of accounting gimmicks. A key tool, really central to their deception, was the widespread use of something called Special Purpose Vehicles, or SPVs. Now, what exactly are those? They're essentially separate legal entities set up for a specific purpose, which in Enron's case was often to hide massive leverage, huge amounts of debt, and mask their true losses, keeping them off the main company's balance sheet. It was all about making the company look far healthier and more profitable than it actually was. The core of Enron's strategy was exploiting flaws in market design and aggressively manipulating energy trading to create artificial price signals, which means inflated prices. Their profit, chillingly, often came directly from market suffering. When electricity prices spiked, sometimes artificially because of their actions, Enron profited massively while ordinary people and businesses in California bore the brunt of those exorbitant costs. Enron essentially monetized market chaos, making money from the instability they helped create. And here's where it gets really interesting and frankly quite concerning. A detailed short seller report from Hindenburg Research, published back in January 2023, caused a massive stir by drawing these parallels. The report meticulously detailed claims of widespread stock price manipulation and undisclosed related party transactions where companies do business with entities that are secretly linked to them. And it alleged the opaque use of offshore entities and those very same things, SPVs, or special purpose vehicles, shell companies basically, that were so central to Enron's unraveling. The report alleged that these practices allowed Adani to take massive loans from banks against stocks whose prices had been, according to Hindenburg, completely manipulated by the company itself. It was a direct accusation of very similar, sophisticated financial engineering designed to inflate value and obscure the true financial picture. When you look closely, you certainly see some undeniable similarities that raise red flags for analysts. The extensive use of multiple entities and these SPVs, areas where stable returns are expected but also where regulation is key. Furthermore, the practice of borrowing heavily against pledged stock and the acute market sensitivity to news are all presented in the Hindenburg report as significant indicators of systemic risk and a concerning lack of transparency. But it's not a perfect mirror image, and that's crucial to highlight. The comparison is a powerful metaphor, but it's not an exact replica. A key difference is there hasn't been a single public smoking gun proving an identical market manipulation scheme like Enron's specific playbook for gaming the California electricity market. Indian regulators and international creditors have certainly conducted scrutiny, especially after the Hindenburg report. Adani, for its part, issued a lengthy rebuttal, nearly 400 pages, fiercely contesting the allegations. It's complex, it's contested, and it's ongoing. So, what does this all mean for you and me? I think the Enron comparison is best viewed as a useful cautionary metaphor. It's not a proven equivalence, but it absolutely justifies sustained public and regulatory scrutiny. The parallel isn't necessarily about identical crimes, but it highlights a chilling pattern. When vast corporate power and incredibly complex financial instruments merge, especially in sectors vital to the public, and there's insufficient oversight or transparency, there's a significant risk, and who bears that risk ultimately? Often it's the ordinary citizen, it's you, whether it's through your electricity bill, your pension funds investments, or just broader economic instability if things go wrong. This isn't just distant corporate news, it's a stark reminder of the vigilance required as a group like Adani expands rapidly into functions like power distribution and electricity metering. Yes, there are parallels between Enron and Adani, but it may be mere coincidence. Both began with trading dominance, moved early into gas, and expanded rapidly into infrastructure, raising questions on transparency and market influence. Each diversified far beyond their starting point, becoming sprawling conglomerates. But while Enron collapsed after its scandal, in Adani case, it was the exposer, Hindenburg, that shut down after its expose. The problem is not really about Adani Group. No, they are a business and they will look to make profits for the shareholders within legal framework, and that they are doing. If someone needs to be blamed for any wrongdoing, then it should be the policymakers, the lawmakers, and the enforcers. Blaming a business if you feel it is doing something wrong is your right, but asking questions of your government if you think it is ignoring the wrongs is your duty. Who is watching the watchman? The focus on any specific business group takes our focus and justified anger away from the legislators and other smaller business who clearly are trying to make a big buck unethically and illegally. This brings us to the next piece of the puzzle. If we connect this corporate governance angle to the bigger picture, a pivotal shift is underway in India's electricity sector. It's driven by two things: the rapid rollout of smart meters and evolving power trading mechanisms. While large-scale power trading isn't a dominant feature of our retail market yet, the groundwork is being laid for that to change. This is genuinely a massive nationwide transformation. The central government's revamped distribution sector scheme, or RDSS program, is spearheading an incredibly ambitious target: the rollout of approximately 250 million prepaid smart meters across India by the end of March 2026. 250 million households. That's almost every single household and small business in the country. And large private vendors are incredibly active, including major players like Adani Energy Solutions, who are heavily involved in rolling out these services, often on a build, own, operate, transfer model. And these smart meters, they're not just digital versions of the old spinning discs. They are powerful, transformative devices. They can provide near real-time consumption data, giving unprecedented visibility into how and when electricity is used, sometimes down to 15-minute intervals. This enables things like time of use tariffs, where prices can vary based on the time of day, and even prepayment options. They also allow for remote connection and disconnection. I can imagine you thinking, okay, fine, but isn't this just about modernizing the grid and making billing more efficient? Where's the fine line between using data efficiently and the potential for exploitation? It's a great question. By themselves, smart meters are just neutral tools. However, combine them with three critical elements and the picture changes entirely. First, market rules that allow for time-varying prices, or even something called nodal pricing, where electricity prices vary not just by time, but by your specific geographic location on the grid. Second, the legal authority to compel the installation of these meters on everyone. Right now, they are often installed for free, but once a certain threshold, a critical mass, is reached, my analysis suggests it could be made mandatory through government mechanisms. And third, an operator, public or private, with clear commercial incentives to maximize revenue from this data and control. That combination is precisely what enables dynamic pricing models to flourish. The risk here is that once a critical mass of these meters is live, and if regulators allow for more granular market-level pricing, an operator could potentially exploit timing and market design to extract value, meaning charge more. Think of it like surge pricing on a ride-sharing app during rush hour, but applied to your electricity. That's what Enron did in the hot summer of California. Uber too had a surge pricing policy which was curtailed by AAP government in Delhi. I don't see the surge pricing anymore, but could it make a comeback? I hope not. Imagine, during a heat wave, or maybe during a crucial cricket match, when everyone's got the TV and fans on, the system could technically send signals that nudge prices upward. What would you do then? This isn't an inherent flaw in the meter, but it represents a significant governance and regulatory design risk. And this brings up a fundamental issue of energy equity. Many Indian states provide heavily subsidized lifeline units, say the first 200 or 400 units of electricity. Disclaimer, I totally support and am completely in favor of some basic units of electricity as fundamental right of the people in current day and age. Okay, that might sound a little controversial to some people, so let me explain. Let me put it in another way. I feel it is the government's fundamental duty, among other duties, to provide its citizens free education, free healthcare, free potable water, and clean air to breathe in. I am not saying these facilities should be unlimited. What I am saying is, it is the duty of the government to give its people a decent life. Otherwise, what is the point of having a right to life? I think it's the Article 21 of the Constitution of India. So when I say free electricity, I mean enough free electricity to run 2 fans, 1 refrigerator, and 6 lights, or let's say 400 to 600 kilowatt hours of electricity per household. It's a crucial social safety net. Automated time of use pricing and mandatory prepayment could make it technically much easier to dismantle these universal cross subsidies. Consumers who can't easily shift their usage, like a low income family, will likely end up paying more. And guess what? What if consumers in Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Telangana, or Andhra Pradesh with higher paying capacity, who frequently experience shortages during peak demand periods due to high consumption and inadequate in-state generation, get the electricity on preferential treatment basis because they can pay more? But the lower income consumers in states like Odisha, Jharkhand, and Chhattisgarh, states that actually produce more than they consume, can go dark because they don't have the surge pricing paying capacity. Is that fair? And with the big push for EVs, the grid will come under tremendous pressure. During times of scarcity, this system could be used to divert electricity to those who can pay the most. My understanding points to a clear hierarchy of who gets priority. Massive data centers would likely outbid corporate offices, who would outbid affluent EV owners, who would certainly outbid lower middle class homes. The big data centers and industries can even have their own captive power plants. But what about ordinary people? It risks creating a two-tiered system where consistent access to power becomes primarily a function of your economic capacity. But even before the EV takeover, there's another so-called green solution that's quietly shaping the future. It's another factor that is driving us towards that cliff, and it's thirsty. Let's shift gears now from the power charging socket on your wall to the fuel pump. Because my research also reveals another powerful policy push, one that might reshape your daily commute, India's ambitious drive towards ethanol blending in petrol. We are seeing targets like E20, a 20% ethanol blend being rolled out, with talk of even higher blends like E27 down the line. This is driven by the goals of reducing our reliance on imported crude oil and aiming for cleaner fuel. But the critical question for many of us is compatibility. What does this mean for your car, especially if it's not brand new? For lower blends like E10, which we've had for some time, most modern petrol engines built after 2008 are generally tolerant, but E20 is a completely different story. It requires specific engineering changes. We are talking about different materials for fuel lines, seals, and pumps because ethanol can be corrosive to certain rubbers and plastics, which are the materials for gaskets and pipes. The car's computer, the engine control unit or ECU, also needs specific tuning to account for the different combustion properties. New vehicles manufactured after April 2025 are mandated to be fully E20 compatible, but retrofitting an older non-compatible car is complex and can be expensive. Using E20 in an uncertified vehicle could lead to premature wear and tear, engine problems, and it could absolutely void your warranty. Brazil is the most progressive nation when it comes to ethanol usage. Starting August 1, 2025, the required ethanol blend will increase to 30% E30 of gasoline. This shift reflects Brazil's ongoing strategy to enhance energy independence, reduce fossil fuel imports, and decarbonize its transport sector. However, it gives the consumers the option to choose which fuel they need, from E5 to E20. Also, Brazil has these flex fuel cars. Almost all light vehicles in Brazil are flex fuel, so the market doesn't really need lower blends. They're built to run on anything from E27, E30 to E100. India does not have that. That is a serious concern for middle-class car owners in India who are used to maintaining and running a car in good conditions for 10 years or more. Ethanol absorbs water and is more corrosive than petrol. Fuel lines, pumps, gaskets, and seals must be made from ethanol-resistant materials like fluoropolymers or special stainless steels to avoid degradation. Personally, I feel ethanol's property of giving a higher octane, 108 versus petrol's 91, works great for my bike. Although it is 10% more expensive, it gives me about 10% more mileage, even though ethanol has about 30% less energy density than normal petrol. But be careful what fuel you're using for your bike or car. Check your manufacturer specifications for fuel. If your car manufacturer specifies E5 or E10, then for E20 fuel, your car will have partial ethanol resistance. It could screw up your engine and pipes big time. I am just a chemical engineer, not an automobile engineer. Just research that part yourself, please. My research flagged a particularly controversial question here. Is the ethanol push, perhaps unintentionally, a covert way to force consumers to replace their cars more frequently? Is the push for ethanol actually a covert push for EVs? Car manufacturers gain from shorter lifetime of cars. Government gains from the enormous taxes it levies on car sales. Customer gains from the subsidies it gets from the government. What does the poor family of four, struggling hard to make ends meet, gain from the tax money he or she paid in consumption GST? His children are not getting good affordable education. His parents are not getting decent affordable healthcare. Now, I am presenting it as a political economic inference, not a proven conspiracy. But it's an undeniable technical truth that when you significantly change fuel specifications, it can make older engines less efficient, more expensive to maintain, or even risky to operate long term. Whether the intent is to accelerate vehicle turnover or not, the side effect is real. It creates a de facto pressure to upgrade. And what about the environmental claims? Well, that's not straightforward either. You have to look at the life cycle emissions from growing the feedstock to refining it. While sugarcane ethanol can offer significant greenhouse gas reductions, ethanol from food grains like corn or rice, which raises its own food security questions, often shows much smaller benefits. CNG, another alternative, is cleaner at the tailpipe for some pollutants, but is still a fossil fuel and suffers from the problem of methane leakage or methane slip during production and transport, which is a powerful greenhouse gas. So, no fuel is a simple silver bullet for the environment, I understand that. But for a water-scarce country like India, does wasting groundwater reserves on the sugarcane make sense? Yes, sugarcane is extremely water-intensive, especially when compared to many other crops. Its high water demand is one of the reasons why sugar and ethanol production can strain water resources in water-scarce regions in many parts of India. Let me give you some perspective here. See, in India, we love our sugar. We're the second largest producer in the world. And now, with the government's ethanol blending push, maybe even higher. Sugarcane is being positioned as our fuel crop of the future. Sounds green, sounds clean, but here's the problem. Sugarcane is a water guzzler of epic proportions. On average, it takes 15 to 30,000 liters of water to make just 1 kilo of refined sugar. For ethanol, around 2,500 to 3,500 liters per liter of fuel, that's 2,500 to 3,500 liters per liter of ethanol. Let that sink in. Every time you fill up an ethanol blended tank, you're not just burning fuel. You're burning through our water tables. And where is this happening? In drought-prone states like Maharashtra and Karnataka, two of the top 3 sugarcane producing states in India, places where farmers already face water shortages for food crops. Again, drought-related farmer suicides are not uncommon here. Sugarcane's deep roots don't just pull in water, they pull it away from rice, pulses and vegetables. Basically, it's troubling unless we come up with a policy that states we shift to bamboo-based ethanol. And bamboo is only from particularly the wet tropical areas where it grows naturally, which requires little to no irrigation after the initial establishment phase. Facilitate northeastern states and other places which have good rainfall and are more suited for bamboo plantation. Build agriculture-related top-level universities with high-tech research and development there. Already some great work has been done on developing genetically modified bamboos for higher ethanol yield, but more needs to be done on the planning aspect. That would look like a well-thought-out plan. But there's more to it. Now think about the big picture. With EV hype, higher ethanol blends, and the slow death of petrol engines, is this really about going green? Or about picking winners in an energy game that has nothing to do with sustainability? Remember California's Enron scandal? Traders literally asked power plants to shut down boilers during summer peak hours so prices would spike. When you control the resource, whether that's power lines or water for crops, you can control the market. So next time someone says ethanol is the future, ask them, whose future? The urban driver filling up his car, or the rural community watching their well run dry? Because in this story, the sweetest fuel might just leave the sourest aftertaste. This leads us to the technology that gets the most attention right now, electric vehicles or EVs. They are widely hailed as the clean, green future, but it's crucial to look at the full picture. The reality is that EVs don't magically eliminate pollution, they primarily shift it upstream. While the EV itself has no tailpipe, pollution occurs during the energy-intensive manufacturing of its battery and from the power plants that generate the electricity to charge it. This raises an important environmental justice question. EVs can effectively transfer pollution. You get cleaner air in the big cities where EVs are mostly used, but potentially at the expense of dirtier air in the smaller towns and villages where thermal power plants are often located. The pollution isn't eliminated, it's relocated. It's like saying I'm saving money on my home cooking gas bill by ordering food from Swiggy every night. It's a misdirection. The energy is still consumed and pollution is still created. It just happens somewhere else on a delivery driver's bike, and you don't see it directly. Even so, most comprehensive life cycle assessments, like those from the International Council on Clean Transportation (ICCT), do find that EVs typically reduce overall greenhouse gas emissions compared to petrol cars, provided the electricity grid continues to get cleaner. But there are other hidden costs. The extraction of critical minerals for batteries, lithium, cobalt, nickel, well, that has considerable environmental and social impacts globally. The vast number of people working like slaves in those African nations, like in Congo, where the children are forced into child labor in dangerous and life-threatening conditions, results in many losing their limbs, lives, and more. And we prefer to sit blissfully unaware of these realities, these ugly truths of life, where his child in some cobalt mine has had his or her future taken away because we, the city folk, can drive to our office in clean air-conditioned EV. And while battery recycling is improving, it's not yet a closed-loop solution and can't really meet the massive projected demand on its own. We all hear about how electric vehicles are the future. Cleaner, greener, no tailpipe emissions. But what happens when all those batteries, hundreds of thousands of them, reach the end of their life? Here's the good news. Recycling EV batteries is not just possible, it's opening up huge opportunities. The global EV battery recycling market is expected to explode, growing from about $12 billion in 2023 to over $37 billion by 2033. That's a nearly 12% annual growth rate. The Asia-Pacific region, led by China, Japan, and South Korea, is the fastest growing hub thanks to rapid EV adoption and strong government backing. China leads the world in recycling capacity with over 500,000 metric tons processed per year. The US and Europe each handle around 200,000 tons annually. In India, the industry is just starting. Spent EV batteries actually hold a fortune in lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper. These minerals are vital for future batteries and often come from geopolitically risky supply chains. EV batteries come in many chemistries, LFP, NMC, NCA, even emerging solid-state types, each needing its own recycling process. That drives up costs and complexity. In some cases, material recovery losses of 20 to 30% are the norm, but let's assume we will sort those things out as we evolve in this sector. I'm sure our entrepreneurs and scientists are capable of doing that, but let's see if it makes sense to depend on that. Let's see the present value, if at all EV offers. Let's look at some numbers. You could fact check me on that, but this is a rough calculation I did and I'll share the details of the calculation separately. On a cleaner grid, EVs win decisively. On a coal-heavy grid, they are marginal or similar to petrol once battery production is counted. CEA or Climate Transparency numbers show India's grid intensity is high, which is not good, relative to G20 averages. Let's assume a typical driver drives 1,000 kilometers a month. On a coal-dominated Indian grid, a typical electric sedan running on 15 kilowatt-hour per 100 kilometers will emit roughly 107 to 144 kilograms CO2 or carbon dioxide from electricity production for every 1,000 kilometers of driving. That's a rough estimate of the operational or tank-to-wheel emissions. When you add a fair share of battery manufacturing emissions allocated over the battery lifetime, the total life cycle CO2 for 1,000 kilometers of EV driving is roughly 128 to 180 kilograms CO2, depending on assumptions, battery size, battery manufacturing intensity, grid intensity. That range makes the EV roughly comparable to and often slightly lower than a typical petrol car, which is about 162 kilograms CO2 per 1,000 kilometers using 7 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers. You can punch in your numbers to see how that goes. I am taking conservative estimates based on the ranges that are provided in scientific and public domains. I am assuming the EV's battery lifetime of 200,000 kilometers, although typical planning per lifetime assumption, many makers warranty 8 years or 160,000 kilometers ranges. For comparison, a small petrol hatchback in India might emit around 2 tons CO2 per year if driven about 12,000 kilometers. Results depend very much on the grid carbon intensity and the battery assumptions. So, in a case like India, where we use low grade coal, and EVs will be lower in efficiency due to the harsh weather conditions, traffic congestions, and road conditions, the carbon dioxide emissions could actually be higher. I don't want to sound pessimistic, but the gains right now, the gains for the public at large, even by conservative estimates, do not make sense to me. Solid state batteries, sodium salt batteries, and blade batteries, these are great. But overdependence on them without addressing the source or generation of power looks myopic. And I am not even considering transmission losses, thefts, or drop in EV battery efficiency over time. That would add further to the greenhouse gases numbers we got. And here's a detail that often gets overlooked: the non-exhaust pollution. This comes from tire wear, brake dust, and road dust. And guess what? Because EVs are significantly heavier due to their massive batteries, they can actually produce more particle pollution from tire wear. This is offset by the fact that they use their friction brakes much less due to regenerative braking, which reduces brake dust. The net effect is complex. However, studies report that non-exhaust PM2.5 emissions from a vehicle can easily be in the range of 5 to 10 milligrams per kilometer, primarily from tires and road wear. As tailpipe emissions from modern petrol cars get cleaner, this non-exhaust pollution from all cars, including heavy EVs, becomes an increasingly dominant source of toxic inhalable particulate matter. So, EVs don't solve this problem on their own. Then there are the practical challenges for India. Our extreme heat significantly accelerates the degradation of lithium-ion batteries, reducing their lifespan. Just running the AC on high can noticeably cut an EV's range. Heavy monsoons pose a risk of water damage to sensitive electronics, and our famous road conditions, infinite potholes, many are more like sinkholes that swallow motorcycles, dug up and unattended roads that trap even the big trucks, unpaved sections, and massive speed breakers put a lot of stress on the heavier EV chassis and create a real risk of damaging the low-slung battery pack. The real-world range you experience can often be 20 to 30% lower than the optimistic figures quoted in brochures. Now, for the interesting part. This is where all these threads truly converge, where the eggs in one basket theme hits home with terrifying force. My research points to a critical national security concern directly related to this rapid push for EVs, a potentially crippling dependence on China for the essential components. This isn't just about economics, it's about geopolitical power and vulnerability. China currently holds a dominant position across the EV supply chain. Take rare earth elements, essential for the high-performance magnets in many EV motors. Data from the US Geological Survey consistently shows China accounting for over 70% of global rare earth processing. And for batteries, a vast proportion of global manufacturing capacity for the cells, and even more critically, for refining the precursor materials, the specialized chemicals that make the battery work, is heavily concentrated in China. It's an extreme concentration of a critical supply chain. This brings me to a powerful question that my research posed, one that brings this whole dilemma into sharp focus. What is better? To be reliant on 10 different nations for fuel like crude oil so that no one can dictate terms? Diversification of your risk portfolio? Or to be dependent on one nation, China, a nation that is borderline hostile to India, that controls almost all the inputs that will run our future logistics, transport, and even farm vehicles if we continue on this path? This lays bare the strategic trade-off. The traditional model for oil is a distributed risk model. The new model for EVs, as it stands today, concentrates that risk immensely, placing a huge chunk of our nation's future into a single, potentially highly vulnerable supply chain. Consider this. Tesla announced that over 95% of the parts for its cars made in the Shanghai Gigafactory are sourced locally within China. This shows their incredible domestic ecosystem. Now, what about our own companies like Tata or Mahindra? While they are aggressively trying to localize and precise public data is hard to come by, my understanding is that for the most critical component, the advanced battery cell and its precursor materials, our reliance on imports, primarily from East Asia, remains extremely high. The mitigation strategies are clear but challenging. Aggressive diversification of sourcing, strategic stockpiling, and crucially, rapidly building robust domestic capacity for the entire value chain, from cell manufacturing to recycling, right here in India. But achieving true self-sufficiency is a decade-long project. It really boils down to this classic strategic dilemma: concentrated power versus diversified resilience. And finally, this all ties back to a fundamental public policy question. How are these large-scale shifts and the subsidies supporting them actually funded? Ultimately, it's taxpayer money. My research points out that this funding can be regressive. If money comes from broad-based taxes like GST, but the benefits primarily flow to a smaller, wealthier segment of the population who can afford a new EV, then it's essentially a redistribution of wealth that might be considered unfair. Why should a fisherman in Kerala or a kiosk owner in Ladakh have to indirectly pay through their taxes for the subsidy on an EV that a wealthy restaurant owner in Delhi buys? It's a valid question of fairness. This forces a very tough question about our national priorities. Are we investing in an energy future that benefits everyone equitably? Or are we making trade-offs that negatively impact basic services like health and education? My research found indicative figures for 2024 suggesting India's public spending on education is around $14 billion and healthcare around $11 billion. China's equivalent figures are cited as closer to $495 billion for education and $264 billion for healthcare. Even accounting for differences in economy, size, and data calculation, the difference in magnitude and priority is stark. I came across a post that showed what China spends on just two of its universities, Tsinghua and Peking, is the entire higher education budget of India. Can you believe that? Basically, since the populations of both countries are more or less similar, China spends a massive 35 times more on education per person than India does. And an equally impressive 25 times more on healthcare per person than India does. I would imagine that if we take the spends of both countries in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics into picture, it will skew the picture further in favor of China. Those are some amazing and mind-blowing figures. Also in India, we have to acknowledge that corruption probably erodes a significant portion of that already smaller budget. This raises an important question for India about its allocation priorities, about balancing long-term strategic goals with the immediate, widespread societal needs of the majority. And if you are thinking exports, well, we will lose the competitive advantage in price and quality that we have in IC engines, internal combustion engines, to the far superior and advanced EVs from China. We cannot compete with them in terms of quality or price when it comes to technology here. And since China controls almost all the natural resources linked to the EVs, and perhaps the important patents too, how do we convince any other country to buy from us? We can put import tariffs on Chinese goods and even subsidize made in India EVs, but we cannot ask another country to buy from us if we are not providing anything more valuable. Exports will be under tremendous pressure. Rupee could sink further compared to other reserve currencies. What is the end goal here then? Is over-inclination to EV a self-sided goal for India? Are we entrapped in a bigger global strategic play? Only time will tell. So, after weaving all these threads together, the central question remains, are we just seeing a collection of isolated events, or is there a discernible pattern emerging? The nuanced conclusion from all my digging is this: we are not seeing evidence of a single centrally coordinated conspiracy. Instead, what we appear to be witnessing is a powerful convergence of risk factors. Overlapping commercial strategies, regulatory shifts, and national policy pushes are intersecting, and this complex interplay inevitably creates winners and losers. The overarching message here is that paranoia isn't the answer. EV is neither the poison nor the solution. Battery technology is critical for the future, no doubts about that. But batteries do not equate to EVs. A move towards EVs must be well calibrated. What is needed is a clear-eyed, informed, and critical understanding of these converging trends. The remedy lies in proactive measures, demanding transparent regulation, insisting on robust public oversight, implementing strong consumer protections, and making strategic, diversified investments in our own domestic industrial capacity. And crucially, ensuring a continued investment in essential public services like health and education so that the fundamental social contract remains fair during this period of rapid change. It's about building a holistic approach that ensures India's energy future is secured not just efficiently, but also equitably in a way that truly benefits all its citizens. And critically, an approach that consciously avoids the perilous situation of putting too many of our nation's crucial eggs into one single strategic basket. Let's not put the lifeline of our economy, the transport and logistics vehicles, under undue risk so quickly. Let's not rush. Let's see how hydrogen fuel engines turn out. Let's build nuclear energy capabilities. Let's have better roads and public transport. Let's work on batteries, but not mandate or push EVs when we do not have the power or raw material security or infrastructure in place. Let's think carefully. Let's not put our country and its people at risk. Let's not force ourselves into a corner where another hostile country or a corrupt businessman takes our country hostage. Well, a lot of you might be thinking solar. Let's discuss that quickly too. India has strong solar potential in theory, but in practice faces big roadblocks compared to the US or China. While sunlight availability is good, extreme heat reduces solar cell efficiency, and monsoons, humidity, dust, and air pollution, especially in northern India, can cut output by 25% unless panels are cleaned often, raising costs. Vacant land is another challenge. Unlike the US, with vast unused deserts, most empty land in India is farmland, grazing areas, or ecologically sensitive zones. Large solar farms often compete with agriculture, though agrivoltaics could help if adapted. High solar penetration would also require large-scale storage for nighttime supply, but India's capacity in lithium-ion, sodium-ion, or pumped hydro is far smaller than that of the US or China. China's edge comes from using vast desert areas for mega solar farms without impacting farmland, and from its complete dominance of the PV manufacturing chain from polysilicon to panels, while India still imports around 80% of its modules, mostly from China, despite domestic efforts like the PLI scheme and projects from Adani and Reliance. PLI schemes are the production-linked incentive schemes. These are government programs that give financial incentives to companies based on the amount of goods they manufacture in India. Also, the challenge with solar panel recycling is that it costs more to recycle than simply dumping it. So, without strong policy incentives or extended producer responsibility rules, most panels end up as waste in landfills. Panels can last 25 to 30 years, although many experts suggest it will be there for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Also, once discarded, they pose risks. Lead and other toxic substances can leach into soil and water and wreak health havoc. It's like the plastic and polythene bag recycling. They can be recycled, but most of it actually goes into landfills. We've certainly covered a vast and complex landscape today. I hope this discussion has provided you with a clearer, more informed, and maybe even a more vigilant perspective on the decisions shaping our collective future. So, if I have to summarize it all, then step 1, ever notice how the big changes never start big? They start small, innocent, almost friendly. Take electric vehicles or ethanol fuel. First they show up with freebies, subsidies, special discounts. You see ads about clean air and saving the planet. A nudge here, a little push there. What economists call nudge theory. No one's forcing you. They just make the right choice look smart and guilt-free. Next, step 2. Then something happens. Enough people adopt it. A critical mass. Suddenly, it's not just a smart choice, it's the moral choice. You rationalize something even when you know it's wrong. You can't do much about it. You are too invested in it. It's become an integral part of your identity. People rationalize their continued involvement by focusing on positive aspects and downplaying negative ones, even if the negative aspects are significant. It's a combination of biases, primarily confirmation bias and self-serving bias. Politicians, celebrities, and influencers tell you it's the right thing to do. Posters say your sacrifice today is for the greater good, and if you hesitate, you're the one holding back progress. Nobody wants to be that person. Then, step 3, the pivot. The freebies, gone. The subsidies, pulled back. Supply, controlled. Demand, surging. And prices higher than you ever imagined. Those EVs, the charging stations and battery replacements cost far more than you were led to believe. Now it's your only option. And guess what? Someone's making a fortune. What began as a friendly nudge turns into a moral leash, and finally, a financial trap. A small change today could, in some unseen future, put hundreds of millions of Indians in metaphorical chains. Because the playbook never changes, only the product does. Then comes the final move, the hidden fourth step. What if all this is orchestrated by a third party? Let's say China, since it controls the EV and battery markets. What if it was its long-term plan and we were just the pawns? Don't be surprised. This is what erstwhile USSR or present-day Russia, the communist regime, would do. Slowly infiltrate the academia of US over decades. No rush. Like they say about the communist philosophy, you may have all the watches and clocks in the world. We have all the time. Perfect entrapment. So, while a small, harmless-sounding change like a smart meter or a seemingly progressive push toward ethanol may feel unrelated today, they could, in some unforeseen future, come together as part of a bigger plan and bind hundreds of millions of Indians in metaphorical chains. Like they say, if you err on the side of caution. Okay, now how does that concern us? How is it linked to us, to India? History doesn't repeat, but it sure rhymes. Back in the 1990s, an American energy company called Enron, based in Houston, Texas, sold itself as the future. High-tech, efficient, green. Yes, green. It built political connections. Back then, George W. Bush, from a powerful Texas political family, was on the rise, and so was Enron. But most energy-related regulation policies were decided at a federal or central level in the US. Enron waited. And then George W. Bush was elected the US president. Enron catapulted into stratosphere. Enron received accolades, most notably being named Fortune's most innovative company in America for 6 consecutive years, from 1996 to 2001. During the Bush tenure, policy decisions often aligned with the interests of energy giants like Enron, until the company imploded in scandal. They were literally influencing and rewriting policies to suit them. That change wasn't sold as corporate favoritism. It was framed as freedom of choice for consumers. Fast forward to India, the Adani Group was founded in Ahmedabad, Gujarat. The Adani Group had been growing steadily during the years when Narendra Modi was Chief Minister of Gujarat. But when Narendra Modi became Prime Minister in 2014, Adani's rise went from steady climb to vertical takeoff. Massive infrastructure contracts, favorable regulatory shifts, and market dominance followed, as if political gravity itself had been suspended. Different countries, different decades, but the pattern feels familiar. Like the current generation says, same but different. A powerful corporate actor rises alongside a political leader, policy shifts are sold as progress, and the lines between public interest and private profit begin to blur. Now, there's something very holy in science. We say, correlation does not imply causation, meaning the growth of Adani and the rise of Modi, or vice versa, could be purely coincidental. Our concern should be bigger. Our concern should be global forces at play, where the hunter becomes the hunted. There are layers to it, like the Russian Matryoshka dolls, also known as stacking dolls or nesting dolls. And history reminds us, when corporations and politics dance too closely, the music often stops suddenly, and the public is left with the bill. Here's a final thought to ponder. In our increasingly interconnected world, the seemingly isolated choices made by corporations, regulators, and policymakers often converge in unexpected ways, creating unforeseen concentrations of power and hidden costs. So, ask yourself, what concentrations of power, what dependencies, or what hidden costs might you be overlooking in other aspects of our society? Maybe it's in the food systems that feed you, the digital platforms you rely on, or the information you consume. What does it truly mean to genuinely diversify your basket in this complex new age? It's a fundamental question of resilience, equity, and foresight that affects us all. Until next time, keep asking questions.
Thank you for listening to The Way I Understand It. If this episode made you think, share it with someone who you think should know more about things. Don't forget to like, follow, share, and send in your own questions. We will explore them in a future episode. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next one.